Today, WGC Explorers continues to give you a glimpse into people behind the papers that are being submitted to the 2022 World Gas Conference under its call for papers. The call for papers is an exciting process where industry experts have the opportunity to submit a project brief and to have the chance to present their work at the World Gas Conference in 2022. For the authors, the call for papers is a wonderful way to, one, be engaged in international sustainable energy conversation, to showcase your expertise, and to reach a global audience with your work, an audience who acts as a forum and where the global energy community can discuss your work. For non-technical people like myself, the call for papers provides early insights into new research streams, new technologies, and current commercial practices that will be important in a sustainable energy future. Today, I would like to welcome Dinesh Kumar, Chief Manager, International LNG at the Gas Authority of India Limited, otherwise known as GAIL. This company is a government-owned natural gas corporation responsible for natural gas processing and distribution in India and is headquartered in New Delhi. Dinesh has submitted an abstract under the call for papers for the 2022 World Gas Conference titled Innovative Structures in the LNG Space. Welcome, Dinesh.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me here.
I'd like to begin these interviews by asking you to take a moment to tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your career, which is under the ownership of the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Government of India, and your responsibilities. Right now, this is a rather exciting time to be engaged in the international LNG markets.
Yes. So my name is Dinesh Kumar. You rightly said I work with GAIL, which is the National Gas Company of India. So GAIL was set up, way back in 1984, close to 36, 37 years now, with the purpose of expanding natural gas infrastructure in the country. So that is how GAIL started. Our primary focus initially was to lay down the pipeline infrastructure in the country and take it to the level of the developed countries. That is how we started. Then over the years, we have moved, across the value chain. Now we have a good upstream portfolio. And also on the downstream side, now we are into petrochemicals, gas processing, and also we are expanding our business in a big way in city gas distribution, where we sell, piped natural gas to household, then compressed natural gas for the vehicles. So now GAIL is, present across the whole value chain of gas. Also, now we are also trying to diversify into new business areas. We are trying to, grow our business in renewable space into solar and wind. And also, as you must have seen last, year or so, hydrogen is something which all the energy companies are looking at. So we are also, doing some pilot projects in hydrogen. In a nutshell, this is what all GAIL is doing. I'll also like to mention that GAIL is one of the big companies in the LNG space. We have a very strong LNG portfolio, around 14 million tons of long-term contracts. So which makes us GAIL amongst the top 10 companies in the world when it comes to the size of the LNG portfolio.
How many customers would you give me a ballpark estimate of that GAIL serves?
In India, we supply to customers across various verticals, to the fertilizer companies, to the power companies, and through city gas distribution, we reach out to the households and the supply gas to the vehicles. So I think it's a very, very big customer base, and we are the dominant company in India. We have close to 50% market share when it comes to gas trading and all, and also our market share is close to 70% when it comes to pipeline infrastructure.
As you said, you serve the entire value chain on the gas side in India.
Yeah.
Well, your group has incredible responsibility, financial responsibility, actual, for the management of these contracts and cargoes. I'm just curious how many people are on your team and how many people are involved in the LNG business within the GAIL structure.
So Terry, as I said, we have a big portfolio of 14 million tons in LNG space. So we have a team of around 18 20 people, which looks after the different verticals of the LNG business. There is a team which looks after the operations on the US side. Then we have a small team which looks after the shipping side. Then we also have a team which looks after the operations of the cargoes which land up here in India. So I am part of the LNG trading team, which has around 3-4 people. So we have the responsibility of optimizing the LNG portfolio and selling these cargoes internationally.
That's rather remarkable. That's, as I noted, a small group with huge responsibilities.
Yeah, it's interesting, and as you're aware, LNG is a very very exciting business. The macros and the micros, everything impacts the LNG market. So it's really exciting to work in this industry.
Your paper was about the 2019 LNG market, which is the total antithesis of what we're seeing and experiencing today markets. But like any market, any commodities market, there's always going to be ups and downs. And in my career, this is probably the 5th time we've had this kind of an up and down situation here.
Coming back to my profile in GAIL, I've been working with GAIL for last 15 years now. Feels like ever. So initial, 10 years, I was part of the international business development team. So at that time, I got an opportunity to work on the Cove Point long-term contract. So it's a 20-year deal which we signed with the Cove Point way back in 2013. So at that time, if I rightly remember, it was one of the first tolling contract on the liquefaction side. So on the regas side, generally the contracts are on tolling basis, but on the liquefaction side, I think it was one of the first contracts on the tolling model on the liquefaction side. So after that, for around the last 5 years or so, I've been working in the LNG trading space, where my responsibility is to sell the cargoes in international market. So, some of the cargoes coming out of US, we don't bring all the cargoes in India. We sell it internationally. So that is where I come in. And apart from, plain vanilla sale, my another responsibility is to optimize the LNG portfolio through structures such as time swap, which we'll discuss later on in this discussion.
Your paper focuses on the challenges that you faced in this market back in 2019, the LNG market there. And you note in the paper that the pure sale structure you had would lead to a major loss on each cargo. And to avoid this risk, you and your team developed a portfolio approach and innovative contract structures to minimize these losses. Walk us through some of the mechanisms you developed, such as the time swaps and long-term time swaps you discuss in your paper, which I think you said were the first transactions of this type in the world. How do these work, the time swaps and the long-term time swaps?
So, GAIL is, one of the most innovative companies in the LNG space. It has never, shied away, trying out different structures. I mentioned about the Cove Point contract. It was one of the first contracts in the tolling space on the liquefaction side. So the problem which we faced was that during the early part of the last decade, in 2011-12, we had signed a slew of long-term contracts. So we signed 2 contracts in US. One is with Cove Point, another with Sabine Pass, totaling around 5.8 million tons. Then we signed another contract with Gazprom, which is of around 2.85 million tons. So in total, around 8 plus volume of LNG. So all of these 3 contracts came into commercial operations during early part of 2018. So the contracts were signed during the early part of the decade, and by the time these contracts came into operations, the entire market had changed. The crude prices had come down since the early part of the last decade, when they were around $100, $80. They had come down to $50, $60 by 2017-18. And also what happened was that during the middle part of the last decade, the demand in India was quite tepid. It didn't grow as was expected. So when these contracts came online, we didn't had enough demand in the Indian market to bring all the LNG into India and sell in India. And also what had happened was that spot prices had come down drastically because there was too much LNG in the market. There was kind of a glut. So spot prices were very low, which is, totally opposite to what is happening now. So we had a dual challenge. For number one, we had to find a market for this huge volume, which had come online at one go. Just imagine, 6-7 million tons of LNG coming into your portfolio in a span of few months. So we had a dual challenge. We had to find the market for this LNG, and then also, we cannot sell all the LNG at the spot prices because the spot prices were too low. So if we, sell a big chunk of volume linked to spot prices, we would have made huge losses. So this is the challenge we faced. So the structure on which I worked on was a long-term time swap. So basically, the idea was that since our portfolio is long now, so why don't we sell, some volume now for a midterm kind of a period, say 5 years, and then when the market in India improves and we have more demand in India, then we can buy back this volume. And another thing which was important for us in the structure was that we wanted to sell the volume as close to our cost price, because the LNG market is quite liquid. So if we wanted to sell it in the market, we could have done so. But then we would have got the market price, which was very, very uncompetitive for us. So that was the dual objective of this long-term time swap structure.
It's interesting that you and your team put together this idea to mitigate this risk for the company. How did you test this in the marketplace? What was the initial reactions when you went out into the marketplace and proposed this to some of your suppliers?
To be very frank, the response was not very positive at that time because the spot prices were low. There was a glut in the market. So nobody wanted to buy LNG during that time for a midterm or a long-term kind of a period. Everybody wanted to increase their exposure to spot market and did not wanted to commit on midterm or long-term basis. So if I correctly remember, I think we would have reached out to 20 odd parties, both on formal and informal basis. So other than, a couple of parties, the response was not very positive. But after a lot of trying out, finally we were able to find a counterparty, who saw value in this kind of a structure. And, we were able to make progress and close the deal. In fact, another interesting part was that the deal was closed just a couple of weeks before we had a nationwide lockdown here in India, way back in March 2020.
What I found interesting in your paper is that not only did these swaps solve your short-term problem, but you said in the paper that this setup, these contracts, new contracts, et cetera, allowed you to take additional LNG volumes to meet demand in coming up in the mid 2020s. How does that work?
As I said, the structure is like that during the initial part of the contract, it's a 10-year contract. So for the initial part of the contract, we sell the LNG cargoes to the counterparty. So for a period, say, starting from 21 to 25, and we buy back the equivalent volume from the counterparty starting 2026 till 2030. So, as the demand in India grows in the coming years, and GAIL will require more LNG. So we'll have, we will have more LNG coming out of this contract during that part of the timeline where we foresee that demand in India will, certainly be very, very high compared to now.
That was 2019. Now, the LNG market you face now is the exact opposite of this. We've seen in less than a year and a half, liquefied natural gas prices have gone from record lows to record highs. And the market's kind of reeling from that right now. And from, just coming out of the impact of the pandemic. Now we're seeing LNG prices hitting what? I don't know what they are today, but they've hit $34 a million British thermal units last week. And European gas prices are 300% higher than they were a year ago. Your product's focused on a down market. Do you think there's a value in the products you developed in this type of market where prices are going up? And how would that work? In other words, can long-term swap transacts mitigate risk on both sides, high and low?
The portfolio of each company is different, and the requirement and the need of each company is different. This long-term time swap was our requirement during that point of time. So that is how we wanted to do it, and eventually we closed it. But I'm sure that these type of structures, this time swap and destination swap, they can create value for any company. In fact, you asked the question that how can we use these kind of structures in today's market, which is totally opposite to the market in 2018-19. So I'll tell you that currently we are doing just the opposite. We are currently buying cargoes now and selling cargoes of future. So which is just opposite to the long-term time swap structure. Of course, the transactions which we are doing now are on spot or short-term basis, but just wanted to bring in the point that little bit of tweaking of the structure. These kind of optimization structures are really helpful for any company which has a big portfolio in the LNG space.
So there's always this tension of people who want to operate in the spot market versus people who would like to longer term contracts. And especially those people who are building these LNG facilities, production facilities, always want long-term contracts. And the customers want the most market flexibility they can get. Do you have any insight or any feel for how this is going to settle out sometime after this latest price spike?
From 2017 to 2020, nobody wanted to do a long-term contract. Right. When we were going into the market in India and wanted to sell our LNG on long-term basis, nobody was willing to do a long-term contract. Everybody wanted to have a spot exposure. And if you remember, in 1920, doing contracts linked to JKM was the flavor of the season, because spot prices were low, so everybody wanted to do a contract linked to JKM. But see how the market has changed in 2021. It's just the opposite. Now nobody wants to have spot in their portfolio. Everybody wants to go for long-term contracts. So I think this is a very good time for the developers. They were struggling to find customers for long-term contracts during last 3-4 years, but probably they will have more buyers now. And from the perspective of any company, which is into this LNG business, what this teaches you is that you should have a mix of all the long-term contracts and spot contracts in your portfolio. Also try to have exposure to different indices. You should have exposure to HH, you should have exposure to Brent, you can have a hybrid of this, you can have exposure to a fixed price kind of a contract. So, it's very, very difficult to predict the market. Market can go anywhere. The only thing which can save you in such uncertain market is having a portfolio which has a mix of long-term spot and a portfolio which has a mix of different indices. Right. This is something which comes handy, when market takes a turn.
The world considers, India one of the most important gas markets. And I imagine your suppliers are going to be working with you closely to ensure the fact that India remains one of the world's most important gas markets, even though the company appears to be diversifying and working on many new areas in the sustainable energy space. So it's going to be interesting. I don't think you'll be bored the next
Yes,
several
yes.
years.
Yeah. You see, we are diversifying, but the demand of gas in India is going to continue to rise in foreseeable future. There are fertilizer plants which are coming up, and India is expanding in a big manner in city gas distribution. So for next 10, 15 years, we will see continuing rise of gas demand in India, and we'll make our best efforts to serve the customer here in India.
Well, your paper is certainly a good example of how you solved with your suppliers and obviously some international customers a very, very serious problem very, very quickly. And I'm sure you'll be coming up with innovative new marketing contracts in the future. We just don't know what those are yet, but it will happen. I want to shift gears for a minute. You heard my perspective as a person who reads these papers, why the call for papers is so valuable and interesting to anyone who's in the energy industry. In previous years, I've been on the committee that selects papers, et cetera. And it's just amazing the wealth of knowledge out there and the people you meet like yourself. But as an author of one of these papers, I'd like to hear your perspective on the value of submitting a paper and participating in the World Gas Conference call for papers process.
No, it's really wonderful, and I would like to thank IGU and WGC for creating this wonderful platform where you can share your ideas, you can share the kind of work you are doing in your respective areas, and when you hear from your counterparts in the industry these different perspectives, it improves your knowledge, and then it helps you to implement those in your company. Also, the reason I submitted this paper was that mostly I have seen in the conferences that most of the papers are bit on the technical side. There are very, very few papers which are which talk about the commercial aspect, especially of the LNG business. So I thought, let me send this paper and share, whatever work we are doing in GAIL.
Yeah, that's one of the exciting things about I saw your paper, that it did focus on the commercial side of the business. Dinesh, thanks for taking the time to talk to us, and good luck in this selection process. I very much hope to see you at the World Gas Conference next year. It's in your neighborhood. It's in Asia this year, which is exciting because that is the most important, fastest growing gas market in the world right now. The deadline for submitting an abstract has been extended, and the new deadline is January 28th, 2022. Dinesh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks a lot. It was great to be part of this interview. Thank you.